Welcome to another edition of Thought Leaders Live, where we talk with thought leaders in business, life, and all points in between. Wow, today is a special one. John David Mann is going to join us, author of many, many books out there. Probably the one that registers probably immediately a spot for a lot of folks in the business world. He's co-wrote The Go-Giver with Bob Berg. Um, the Latte Factor, Out of the Maze. The list goes on. John is a recognized author, and we're going to talk today about the power of the parable. And he's raring to go over there. John, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, it's absolutely my pleasure. Thanks, Greg.
Sure. So we're going to get into this. I mean, we talk a lot. Everybody talks a lot in the business world about how important stories are. And you've written a ton of them. You've written a lot of business books. And so I think we're going to really delve into the parable and the form of the parable and why it's so effective today during the show. But before we get to all that, John, if you could tell us a little bit about your own personal journey and what you're doing these days.
A little bit. I'll try.
A little bit.
Yeah. So, I know a lot of writers who say things like, I've wanted to be a writer since the age of 7. And that's not my story. I have kind of bounced through my life through career after career. I started out as a concert cellist and a classical composer, and I come from a classical music family, and that's what I was going to do the rest of my life. And when I was 17, I dropped out of high school and started a new high school with some friends and kind of got into that education sphere for a while. I got into nutrition and I got the world of direct sales and network marketing. And I was very involved with that world for a while and got into entrepreneurship, started my own food business. But all through those different phases, I was always the guy who wrote the newsletter or wrote the poster or edited the chapter or whatever. And I spent 10 years editing other people's stuff, probably over 10 years, editing people's stuff in various business journals. And that's where I really kind of cut my teeth on the writing craft. And one day I started ghostwriting books for people and co-writing books with people. And then one day I kind of turned around and said, oh, I guess I write. And it turns out that's what I was supposed to be doing all along. It just took me 50 years to figure it out.
I always get a little angry at people like you, John, who can have all these other skills and also be an exceptional writer. I think I'm just kind of a writer who dabbles in some of these other things, especially in marketing. I've done a lot over the years, but that's a real gift. But it also speaks to the power of life experiences and how they probably help make you a better writer, I'm sure.
Absolutely. And I'm also really clear on, somebody asked me the other day on a show, are you a polymath? No, I am not a polymath. Somebody who has a billion skills, right? Leonardo da Vinci was a polymath. Danny Kaye was a polymath. I am not a polymath. And also really clear on the things I'm not very good at. And I'll tell you, Greg, my business model for many, many years was the model that I developed with the Go-Giver, which is I go 50-50 with somebody else on a book project. And the deal, Bob's approached me about writing The Go-Giver and said, I got this idea for a book, but it's not the kind of book I know how to write. I need you to write it. I will partner with you and I'll make you a deal. You write it, I'll market it. And I was like, you're in. So that's what we did. And he's been phenomenal. It's been a fantastic partnership. And I thought, that's what I'll do the rest of my career. I will partner 50-50 with people with a book idea or a life experience that should be in a book or whatever. I'll do the writing, they do the marketing, bingo. I have found that didn't work.
Yeah.
As an entrepreneur, and every writer is an entrepreneur fundamentally, unless you're a staff writer at the New Yorker or something. As an entrepreneur, I thought that I could do I'll do the writing part and I'll have somebody else do the marketing. I don't need to mess with that dirty business of promotion and marketing. It's like, I don't understand it. I don't want to know about it. It's like, I don't get that world. Yeah, you can't really do that.
No.
You kind of have to, it's like saying, hey, I'll eat food, but I won't brush my teeth. I won't take care of myself. I won't take care of my health. I'll just do the things that I love. Well, that's not really a practical way to live. So I've had to learn that as writers, we need to understand the marketing world.
Absolutely. I mean,
I admire you.
yeah, I mean, well, born necessity. I was a ad copywriter. I started out my career doing that,
Yeah,
and
my point.
yeah, and which was great, and had the business team and the ad
Yes,
agencies. But
yes,
even then, I could write the copy, but you had to have a marketing sense. You had to
yeah,
understand branding and
yeah,
all that stuff. So you do need the business end. There's just no way around it. And I
yeah,
think that's any entrepreneur. You want to do the
yeah,
work. We all love doing this kind of work, but you also got to get the work, and that's
yeah,
the big challenge.
yeah, yeah,
Well, let's jump into this a little bit now and talk a little bit about just the power of the story and just from your experience and what you've seen it do. Because I mean, we talk about it so much in business and why it's so important.
yeah.
Why do you think story has so much power?
I think it's really honestly it's really simple. We've known it forever, and that stories resonate. There's this old saying in sales that facts tell, but stories sell. Maybe stories sell. They don't necessarily, though. I think stories don't necessarily sell, but they resonate, and they resound. They when you hear a story that is powerfully told, that has authenticity and dimension behind it, um, and you can relate to the character you're hearing about, it echoes your own life. You see pieces of yourself in that character. When you watch The Shawshank Redemption for the 23rd time, uh, you come away.
Story.
Andy Dufresne talks about hope, and Red, Morgan Freeman, learns that hope, like all good things, never dies. And even after 20 years in this horrible dungeon, the man gets out, and then the other man gets out, and you resonate with that, so that all the prisons in your life, the places where you feel trapped or hemmed in or incapable, you have Andy Dufresne hope around that. I think that's what stories do. They equip us. I was on a podcast once, and the guy, I had just written a novel, and it could just come out, and the host said, "So this latest novel, is it drawn from real life? Is it drawn from real life, or is it pure escapism?" And I was like, "Are those the only two options?" Because they're not the only two options. You can make up. This is my job description. I make up stories in order to tell the truth.
Yeah,
And I think that a good story, a good parable, a great novel, a great streaming TV show for that matter, a great film, um, it doesn't just entertain you, it doesn't just engage you, it gives you equipment to live your life. It equips you to more effectively live your life, handle your life, deal with issues, deal with challenges, pursue your aspirations and dreams and your heart's desire, and so on. It equips you to live your life at an elevated level. And I think people get that from stories. A pure how to business book or a book that's not a story can be incredibly valuable. But it's interesting that the most effective how to books are full of little stories.
right.
Right? I mean, you look at a Malcolm Gladwell book or a Seth Godin book or whatever, and there's lots of little vignettes and stories in there because that's what makes the material resonate.
Yeah. Uh, well, neuroselling, Jeff Bloomfield, and got the book right over here. He talks a lot about whenever he makes a presentation, he starts out with a personal story, and it's
Yeah,
usually pretty emotional too.
yeah,
So he's trying to connect on the emotional level, and this is really applies, I think, a lot to business books. And once you make that emotional connection, people put their guard down a little bit. They
yes,
trust you a little bit more. And then you can come back in with this business story afterwards. So I think there's that kind of emotional connection that you're making with people through story. And I think it has great value there. Um,
yeah, completely.
let's dive into this a little bit more because you just mentioned the business book. And a friend of mine once said to me, he's like, yeah, I read like 100 pages of the business book and then I got it. He's like gets the idea and then he's done. And I mean, it's kind of a cynical way to approach it, but there's a grain of truth to that.
A not uncommon way to approach it. Yeah, yeah,
Not uncommon way to approach it. And So talk to me though about the parable now. And for most people, and for many people, tell us what a parable is, and
Yeah.
then why is it a little bit different than your traditional business book approach?
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning at the outset here that the parable has a bad rap in a lot of circles. I've known a lot of people who, when the Go Giver first came out, we got a good number of very prominent uh, business people, entrepreneurs, business owners, public personalities, say things like, "I don't normally read business fables," they call it, "but I love this one." I
Yeah.
think the author of Mark Sanborn, author of the Fred Factor, said I something like that. Says I don't like business parables, but I like this one, and we got a lot of that. And it is interesting um, that there is this current in the business world. Parables are kind of like, and I think the rap they get is that they are too shallow or too one dimensional or too simplified, too simplistic, and that real life is more sophisticated, more subtle, and more complex. Eh, I get why. I get why, and I think a lot of that has to do with how some are written. But at its heart, a parable is a story that illustrates a principle. We got parables in the New Testament, right? We got parables in the Old Testament. We got parables all through traditional literature. It's a simple story about a woman at the well or whatever it is, about a good Samaritan and a guy lying in a ditch that illustrates a story. If you do it with animals, they call it a fable. You got a tortoise and a hare. You got three little pigs. You got whatever, Goldilocks and the three bears. That makes a point. A business parable. Right now, we're celebrating the 100th anniversary of the business parable, the modern business parable. In 1926, a man named George Clason published a book called The Richest Man in Babylon.
Hmm.
And that was basically the first, what we know of as a modern business parable. And we call it a business parable, but uh, many of these books of this ilk are also kind of life parables. Like when Bob and I published The Go Giver, it says on the subtitle, "A little story about a powerful business idea." We put it right in the cover. Book was out for 6 months, and we start getting letters from family counselors, church groups, all kinds of people who were not business at all. And they were
Hmm.
using our book in their work. Because somewhere in the Go Giver, Pindar, the mentor, says if a principle is true, it doesn't just work in business, it works in your life. In any case, that's really what a parable is. It's a simple story. It's sort of a stripped down novel. In a novel, you expand, you go into lots of detail about the person's rich inner life and their background and their history, and you have a complexity of plot. You don't have any of that in a parable. Parables are much more stripped down and simplified. But, and here's the thing that I think is the most important thing to know, for a parable to work, it is simplified, but it's not dumbed down.
No.
It's simplified, but it still has to be emotionally rich. It
Yeah.
still has to feel real. My belief is that if a character in a parable doesn't feel real to you, if you don't care about the parable, if you're not rooting for them and experience their ambitions and their frustrations and their sense of failure and their sense of aspiration, if you don't feel all that stuff with them, then you're going to say, business parables, I don't like those things. They're shallow. So
Yeah.
it's really, and you said that interesting point about the guy who reads a business book and said, "I read the first 100 pages, and I got it." Well, the parable is that first 100 pages. They're short,
Right.
and I think one of the beauties of business parable, which is one reason I love them so much, is that you have hundreds of thousands, actually millions of readers who aren't going to read a 300-page business book or a 250-page business book. They just aren't going to read it, but they'll read The Go Giver.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of people say to us over the last 2 decades, "Haven't read a book since college, but I read your book in a weekend."
Yep.
It's very gratifying.
Yeah. I mean, Stephen King says it best. He's like, you owe your readers a lot to sit down
Yeah.
and spend all this time with your book. So
Yes.
you better make it very engaging and entertaining or educational. But I
Yeah.
think I think engaging to me is really a key point in what I like so much about the parable and my reading experience with the Go Giver. Because I think that truly is the joy of reading is getting that
Yeah.
book that you can't put down.
Right.
And
Right.
and I mean, I I think the beauty with the Go Giver when I read it, the salesperson, what was the salesperson's name, John?
Joe.
Yeah.
Joe.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, the everyman,
Ordinary Joe.
ordinary Joe. Um, I felt his pain. You made
Yeah.
that emotional connection. He couldn't get a sale. He was getting desperate. I mean, anybody who's an entrepreneur, been in the business world, feels that. And
Yeah.
you made that connection, and then you added this level of intrigue and mystery with the mentor.
Yeah.
And so, here you've got a business book and you have got people just reading every word and wanting to see how this turns out, as opposed to having to do the business book slog.
Yeah.
And even in business books, like you said, the more personal anecdotes you mention, the better it
Yeah.
gets.
Yeah. It's a storytelling skill.
Yeah.
Yeah. What gets readers engaged is the storyteller's toolkit, not the entrepreneurs, business persons, marketers. Well, I should say marketers is a storyteller. So business person, entrepreneur toolkit, that's a different toolkit. Explaining what you do and how the reader could do it is important, but that's not necessarily storytelling.
Yeah.
You know, Hemingway once made a bar bet that he could tell a compelling, he could make a woman cry with 6 words, and so
Words.
he wrote. You heard this. He wrote down the story, and what he wrote down 6 words were, "Baby shoes, brand new, never worn,"
Yeah.
and then the women with him burst into tears.
Yeah.
Right? That's succinct storytelling.
That's my favorite Hemingway, maybe one of my favorite Hemingway pieces of all time.
Yeah,
It's so fantastic. But you bring up a good point about the storytelling. I want to get to this because so many people will go out, can write a book, and a lot of people are very good writers, and they can sit down and they can write their business book.
yeah.
Can just anybody write a parable? I mean, what maybe they can, but I'm just curious from your standpoint, since you've done so many, is there a distinguishing factor here if you're going to try and do this?
Yeah, I think that there really is, Greg. Honestly, it's. I've seen a lot of people because I have a coaching program for writers, and a lot of people come in wanting to write a parable. And I've also just outside of that had a lot of people kind of tell me their idea for a parable and show me a first draft or a chapter or whatever. It's really easy to write a parable that doesn't work. And the way you do that is you figure out the principles you want to teach, and then you make up a character or two or three or four that will illustrate those, and then you just start illustrating your principles. What makes a parable work is the storytelling elements, and there are elements of craft that are not devilishly difficult, but they need to be studied and learned. For example, you can't. Um, uh, uh, a lot of mistake that beginning parable writers make is they have a character who needs to learn something, and he learns it in the first couple chapters. Well, then there's no story left.
Right.
There has to be some kind of tension line that goes through the whole story. And there's a craft to doing that. If you have 15 chapters in your book, every chapter moves the story along in a different way toward a different point, part of the way there, but not all the way there. Your character starts to sort of get it, but he doesn't really get it. And that's very difficult to do when
Yeah.
you start out thinking you know the answer.
Yeah.
You just want to tell the reader, here's how you start a business, or here's how you have a relationship, or here's how you lead a group, or here's how you work your personal finance. I already know the answer. I can give it to you in a page. Well, you can give it to them in a page, but that's a PowerPoint. It's not a
Yeah.
story.
Right.
So I guess the short answer is most people could write a parable, but you have to have a commitment to learn the craft.
Fair enough. There was I keep citing Stephen King because I love his book
Right.
on writing,
Yeah,
and which is just an entertaining read, even if you're not a writer.
it is.
Um, but when I wrote, I think one thing that's interesting, I want to ask you how you do this. Um, he's more of a he just sits down. He's got maybe a general idea, but man, he sits down at that keyboard and he lets it go. And the story takes him where it's going to go. Now, that might work a little bit more in fiction. How do you do it? I mean, I've written memoirs that I've written two, and I feel like there's some kind of magical, organic narrative arc that came out, especially with the first one, where I kind of never going to tell this guy's life story, but the details and the narrative arc emerged as I wrote it. And it's like
Yes.
King says, you these are the stories you teach yourself. And wow, I was just so amazed by how it just, you know, the idea was out there and I found it. And
Yeah.
tell me, John, when you're writing parables and writing yourself, what's your style? Do you get the master outline and you detail everything and you know exactly where you're going to go, or is there a organic quality to it?
Well, I love that question. Let me back up by getting to Stephen King again. So King in that same book talks about a story as an pre-existing artifact that it's your job, like an archaeologist or an archaeobotanist or whatever, your job to extract it from the dusty rocky soil without damaging it as little as possible. And that's very much my philosophy. Once I've figured out I'm going to tell the story, it could be a memoir. I've written a bunch of memoirs because the person already lived their life. But you don't just tell the person's story from cradle to grave, right? A memoir is you're going to carve out a piece of that person's life and explain it. And
Yeah,
a memoir is a novel that just happens to be true. You have to, as you say, you have to get the arc of it. You have to, whether it's a memoir or a business book or a parable or anything else or a novel. Once I've clicked with the idea, then for me it's like it exists and my job is to kind of find it without damaging it much. So to your question about outlines, there's this big debate among writers. Are you a plotter or a pantser? Do you plot it out like a map before you write it, or do you go by the seat of your pants, like Stephen King or like Lee Child? Do you just like start at the beginning and go? So here's how it is for me. I think that the reality is that most writers are somewhere in the middle.
yeah,
I always have an outline. I never start with an outline. So I start with a kind of an accumulating, growing mess of random notes. They might be notes about, big notes about the whole. They might be scenes. They might be clips of dialogue. There might be bits of research. They might be just descriptions, ideas for the final scene, which I'll later change. I have a whole mess of notes that kind of grows like a ball of string until eventually I have to kind of put it in some kind of organization. And then I start to break it into an outline.
yeah,
And I get a one-page outline, but that keeps changing as I keep writing the story because I
yeah.
discover stuff I didn't know. I cannot imagine completely outlining a book before writing it because there's always surprises when you write because it's an organic growing thing. So for me, it's like this. I have an outline, but it's still changing until the day before I send the book to the publisher. It grows along with my draft. The reason I have it, it's kind of like having a map, but it's a
Yeah.
map that, but it's not a map that I bought from Rand McNally or that I looked at on my Google Maps. It's a map like the map of an early continental explorer, where as I push the boundaries of my exploration, I start filling in, oh, there's mountains over here. I gotta sketch those. And you get into the mountains, you go, oh, they're a lot taller than I thought. I gotta change my sketch. And as you push your boundaries, the map changes and changes and changes, but I still need the map.
And it kind of grounds you too. I mean, it's like in
Yeah, it's
marketing, you get a marketing plan and you go off and you start going in this
right.
direction or that direction.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
whoa, what are we doing here? Let's bring this back.
I'll tell you, the Go Giver has 5 laws of stratospheric success, right? Bob and I did not have 5 laws of stratospheric success when we started out writing the book. Those evolved in the course of writing the book.
Well, that's what I was getting my next question, and this one should be a fun one because when do you come up with the name of the book?
Mm.
What has been your experience? How you stumble on the name for the book?
In the minority of cases, in a few cases, the title pre-exists. The Go Giver was just there. Bob had it. It was
Yeah,
all Bob's idea. My first novel, Steel Fear, steel like the metal, Steel Fear,
Yeah.
happens on an aircraft carrier. So it's a thriller on an aircraft carrier, which is made of steel. That title pre-existed the story. Most times that's not the case. And here's a trap that a lot of writers fall into. It's really easy when you're in the early phases of developing a story, whether it's your life story, your business book, whatever it is. You come up, an idea comes to you for a title. You say, oh, I'm going to call it this. The title feels really cool. And you click with it. And it becomes something that paints you into a corner. It becomes a trap.
Yeah.
I always encourage writers to, if they have an idea for a title, hold it very loosely, put it off to the side. Don't put it at the top of your first draft. Don't focus on it. Focus on what the concept of the story is. Play with that. But titles are often, in the real world, in the publishing world, titles often come after the book is written.
Yeah. No, I
And
completely.
when that happens, as the writer, you may go back and reverse engineer a little bit in the manuscript, and
Yeah.
so that you work the title in earlier. But frequently, titles come late in the game or even after you finish the writing.
Yeah, and I've felt in the last, as I've just done two, and in both of them, it just all of a sudden it was there. And this one, like the guy told me this story. His name is Rock LaManna. What a great
Yeah.
name! And
Yeah.
he was telling me about how his wife said to him, "Boy, they named you right." You know, he was because he was just being a, I don't know, he's being a jerk about something, and
Yeah.
they
Stubborn.
they named you right, and I'm like, there it is.
What are you going to do? Right.
They named you right, so that's what we called
I
the
just I just finished ghostwriting a book for a man named Nito Kubain, Qubein, Kubain. Incredible man, fascinating man. He's the president of High Point University in North Carolina, and he's one of the country's greatest philanthropists and entrepreneurs. Wonderful story, and the story of him coming to America and making it as an immigrant with no money and nothing on his back. I early on called it in my head Citizen Kubain. And I thought that was so damn clever.
yeah,
Citizen
right.
Kubain, like Citizen Kane, right?
Yeah,
So,
right.
and because it's all about him becoming a citizen of America and what he's contributed to America. So for me, the book was called Citizen Kubain from the start. That's not what it's going to be published as, because that's not what Nito wants to call it. That's not what his marketing department feels would work. And it's like, I am so married to that title, but I happily let it go because it's not going to happen.
Yeah,
So, that can happen easily. You get married to your own stuff. But one of the
yeah.
secrets to producing a really good book is to not listen only to yourself. You've got to have outside perspective. You've
Mm.
got to have professional help to edit the book, to title the book, to design the book, to market the book. And that's one of the beauties that a really good publisher brings to the table is they bring you an experienced professional team. If you self-publish, then your job is to create that team yourself of professionals because you cannot do it yourself.
John, let me ask you something about the writing process, and I think that's really good about getting the outside team in there, and getting that outside perspective because you're like living the life of a mind. Barton Fink, you're like kind of driving yourself crazy, and you need that outside perspective. But
Yeah.
at what point do you ever get into where you're overwriting? You're like, I'm rewritten this 5 times. I can't seem to quite get it. Any tips, or has that happened to you? And how do you break yourself out of it?
Sure. I mean, three quick tips. I mean, I've got a dozen of them, but three. One is I get distance, put it away for a day, a week, a month,
Yeah.
if I can. Get some distance from it because distance is your friend when you're trying to evaluate your own writing. Second thing is I get a beta reader that I trust to read it, but that's caution with that because you don't want to run the same manuscript through the same person 2, 3, 4 times. You don't want to tire out your best readers. So I counsel not giving it to a beta reader until it's as done as it can be. So the third tip would be for me, when I'm having a problem in the text, I just can't quite make it work. It's usually a structural problem. I back up and I say, okay, put the manuscript aside. Let me describe this book in 3 paragraphs on a blank piece of paper. Or let me write out the whole story of the book on a single piece of paper, not looking at my notes, just from my head. And I start asking my questions about the whole structure of it. Usually, when you get stuck in the writing, it's some bigger structural problem that is the issue.
Oh, that's great. You've given us a bit of a master class here already, John, but tell us about your writing mastery mentorship class, and what you offer right now and how you help people who are in their own writing journey.
Yeah, well, sure. I've done this for 3 years, and I'm having this the time of my life. It's so much fun. For years, I wish there was a way I could help other writers without totally taking up all my time doing that. And then if I did that, I'd never get to write myself. So I created this program. It's a sort of a hybrid between one-on-one coaching and a public class. I have archived curriculum pre-existing on videotapes, 36 hours of it that people can go through on their own time. But also we meet twice a week live on Zoom, this small group who are in the program. It isn't a fixed schedule. People can join at any time. So it's a constantly rotating group. It's a year-long program. And I've got fiction writers, nonfiction writers, parable, memoir, business book, novel, fantasy, kind of everything. So it's a really diverse group. Here's the fascinating thing. Despite how diverse it is, what they're writing about and their genre and their experience level, they encounter the same kind of problems. Most writing problems are human problems.
Yeah.
So the group gets really tight, and it's a really close-knit, wonderful, nurturing group. In the course of it, the goal is to get your book written, and also written at the highest level that is, you can at your highest level possible, and launch it into the world. So yeah, we meet twice a week, and it's most fun I've had since sliced bread. I don't think that's an expression.
um, I do remember when you're talking about, you're talking about how close your group gets. I remember my writing classes from college. One of the few classes I remember from college, which
Yeah.
I went to UW-Madison, so maybe that's possible. It had something to do with it. But the group gets so tight, and because you're really vulnerable. You're really
Yeah.
sharing your inner thoughts and your feelings, and you're putting yourself out there, which, man, if you're
Yeah.
going to be a writer, you got to do that. But it's scary stuff. So I can see how you really get tight with the group.
And the act of writing is kind of weird and unusual. You're creating something out of nothing.
Yeah.
You're putting stuff on the page that doesn't yet exist. And consequently, you end up dealing a lot with mindset and a lot with attitude and a lot, questions of discipline and will and distraction and obstruction. And a lot of human stuff comes up,
Yeah.
right? Nobody has time to write a book. Nobody does,
Yeah.
So a lot comes up in the course of creating this something from nothing.
Well, John, we're past the top of the hour. I think
Oops.
this is usually what happens when writers talk to writers about writing.
Yeah.
We just go
Yeah.
on. But
We can go on.
We can go on. This has been fantastic, and I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me and today. And I'm just really admire your career and your work. And kudos to you for such a long litany of success. And that writing mastery mentorship seems like a great way for you to give back. So congrats.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I love the conversation. I can't believe we're already at time. We could do this for another couple hours.
That's right. Well, thank you also, everyone who joined us today. And we will catch you. Oh, one more thing, John, before we let you go. If somebody wants to join the Writing Mastery Program or wants to work with you on a book, how do they do it?
Probably easiest, just go to my website, John David Mann, 2 N's, johndavidmann.com. And, there's a contact me form on that. You hit that and it'll go to me. That's, I have a page that talks a little bit about the writing programs and has links to those. But just write to me.
And speaking of great titles, you got to mention your Substack name and.
Oh yeah. Yeah, go check out my Substack, my newsletter. I've got 3.5 years worth of monthly issues there, and it's called Mann's, 2 N's, Mann's Search for Meaning. And yes, it is inspired by Viktor Frankl. It's my effort once a month to find meaning in another quote from another famous writer.
Oh, fantastic stuff. Well, thank you, John, and thank you, everyone, for joining us on another edition of